Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fortinet Info-Byte on FortiClient. My name is Adriana Angeleska, and I am the Events and Communication Specialist here at Wavelink. Today's webinar is part 1 of 3, where we will be discussing how businesses can protect their users, whether they are in the office or on the move. Today, your webinar will be hosted by Brendan Shodell, Wavelink's Fortinet Pre-Sales Engineer, and Matt Baldwin, the Enterprise Systems Engineer from Fortinet. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please share them in the questions box and we will answer them at the end. I will now hand over to Kieran to introduce our presenters and open the webinar.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Welcome everyone. Hopefully you're having a lovely morning. As said, today's webinar is about FortiClient, and we're going to have a look at how its advanced endpoint protection agent helps your customers. So with me today is Brendan Skodell, one of Wavelink's pre-sales engineers, and he is based out of Queensland. And Brendan spent the last 8 years within the industry, sort of focusing on integration with Fortinet and other technologies. He has a proven record delivering high-end solutions all the way from data center to SMBs. His focus is to connect with the empowerment of Fortinet partners by mentoring and delivering enablement and training, as well as assisting our partners to be the very best versions of themselves in a competitive market. So thank you so much, Brendan, for coming along and hosting this webinar for us. And with Brendan today is Matt Baldwin, one of Fortinet's enterprise system engineers. We're really happy that Matt could make it with us today. And for those that haven't met Matt, Matt is in charge of pre-sales solutions and training for Fortinet products to partners and customers across the southern regions. So that would be WA, SA, Vic, and Tas. If I've got that right, Matt?
Yeah, it makes
he has over 15 years mixed industry experience, and he specialized in designing Fortinet environments, including FortiClient, which is why we're so happy to have him here with us, and other solutions like VMware and Microsoft solutions. At a high level today, we're going to have a look at why businesses need an endpoint protection solution in today's threat landscape. We'll go through an overview of Fortinet's FortiClient proposition and all of its key benefits. We'll then touch on how MSSPs can utilize FortiClient within their security platform and portfolio. We'll then jump into a demo looking at the multi-tenancy side of FortiClient EMS, as well as the core FortiClient components. We'll then touch on where to find further sales and technical information. And we'll do a quick Q&A for any outstanding questions that we have. Now, if any time you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions section in GoToWebinar, and we'll do our best to get back to you on your inquiry. And if we think it's a really good question, we'll keep it and hold it through to the Q&A section. And just quickly before we jump in, just wanted to say thank you so much for coming along. For those that haven't dealt with us before here at Wavelink, we are a very supportive distributor. We do our best to try and make sure that our partners are aware of the products and how to sell it, how to support it within their customers. We have a massive internal focus on the moment on supporting our partners, and some of the ways we're doing this is through a range of specialized marketing campaigns and also professional services that we have on offer to our partners to try and help you go through and develop and also push out solutions to your partners. And that includes things like staging, rollout, and on-site and remote installation services. And if you want to get a little bit more information on any of that sort of stuff, feel free to reach out at any time, whether myself or the pre-sales or the sales team. I'm more than happy to run you through sort of all the benefits that Wavelink can have to you as a partner. Now with that, we'll jump straight in and I'll pass across to Brendan to run you through why businesses need an endpoint protection solution.
Thank you, Kieran. Just make sure I get the right monitor. That one. Sorry about that. So needing a business, well, why does a business need an endpoint protection solution is a very good question. And it's because of the current and evolving threat landscape that is always changing in our industry. So why should we care? So in today's business world, data is the most valuable asset of a company, even if they don't realize it. And to lose that data or access to that data could put the entire business at risk of insolvency. Endpoint security is how corporations protect their devices against cyber threats while allowing employees to work securely and remotely. And there's many cases where we've seen lately about all the data breaches. So and it has massive impacts on things like insurance as well. So more than 40% of Australians work from home. And so prior to the pandemic, the percentage of employed people working from home on a regular basis had been steadily increasing around the world, and to a percentage point every 2 years. Our latest data for August 2021, which is the latest that we could find at the moment, the Delta period impacts were deepening and are showing an 8.4% point jump to 40.6% now. So it's still increasing as we're talking. 80% of successful breaches are new or unknown zero-day attacks. So these attacks are not known to security vendors, and we still have to try and detect and prevent them. The increase in remote workers since the beginning of 2020 has meant that organizations have had a whole new range of mobile devices to monitor and manage, including administering patches and ensuring the operating systems are kept up to date. And it isn't just operating systems, it's also applications. So this is web browsers or media players or any form of software that are on these devices. So through 2021, 99% of vulnerabilities exploited will continue to be ones known by security and IT professionals for at least a year. So 68% of IT security professionals say that their company experienced one or more endpoint attacks. So these numbers are, rather high. 81% of businesses experiencing an attack involving some form of malware. So this is something that a user has brought onto the machine. 28% experiencing attacks involving compromised or stolen devices. So, it could be a device that someone left on a train or left at a fast food outlet. You never know. We got to protect against that. So an example is the ThinkPHP remote code execution vulnerability. Open source PHP framework vulnerabilities are still being exploited in the wild, and this is a known attack. A remote code execution vulnerability exists within multiple subsystems of ThinkPHP. FortiGuard labs continue to see high exploitation attempts of these old vulnerabilities of more than 50,000 IPS device detections per day. So, if these attacks are still going on, these are easily preventable. So now I'll hand over to Matt to talk about FortiClient.
Thank you. Not that screen. How do I swap?
That is an excellent question.
Here we go. That one. That one. All right. Can you see everything okay?
Sure can. Thank you, Matt.
Awesome. So I'm just going to run through some of the, pros and features around FortiClient. As with all of our products, it's heavily integrated into our other suite of technologies. So being able to send and receive threat intelligence integrates into your FortiGate next-gen firewall for some tagging and threat stats and things like that. It can also send files off to sandboxing technologies, either a fully fledged FortiSandbox or to the FortiSandbox cloud platform for sort of zero-day threat detection. And it can also hold that file until it's been detonated. So there's sort of that no patient zero for 0-day threats. And it's all powered by the fabulous FortiGuard labs, and all of that logging and threat intel information can then be sent to FortiAnalyzer, FortiSIEM for sort of analytical reporting. Yeah, we all know the Fortinet Security Mesh, and it plugs into it falls under the Zero Trust Access side of the security mesh, and we'll skip over that. So like I said, powered by FortiGuard labs. So when you kind of think about what FortiGuard labs do, they're the brains really of all of our threat intel. And there's a lot of AI, machine learning driving that technology, as well as a whole bunch of real people doing the threat research, working with the likes of the Cyber Threat Alliance to sort of collate and perform threat intel and create the signatures, which get fed into the web security, which get fed into your threat hunting tools in your NOC and SOC, so in FortiAnalyzer as well. And then we also have some consulting arm to FortiGuard, where they can do some breach response or forensic analysis, which we'll touch on towards the end as well. So FortiClient has been classed as visionary in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So at least we're in there. But yeah, we get excellent results in some of the MITRE ATT&CK evaluation, and it is quite a lightweight, easy to deploy agent that we install. So that agent is all centrally managed by what we call EMS, so the Endpoint Management Server. And that can be deployed either on-premise on a Windows server, or it can also be run as a SaaS platform in the FortiCloud environment. That sort of allows you to do all of your profile management, configuration, deployment, and management of the actual application as well. You can integrate that with all of your sort of enterprise authentication platforms. So the ability to then use OUs and user groups, security groups, to define different profiles and policies for the endpoint protection. It also then gathers up a whole bunch of the intel, so nice dashboards, so you can see threats, you can see what software has been installed, because it's also a vulnerability scanner. It has all the sort of all the reports on vulnerable software that's been installed on your devices, and then you can start pushing out things like the ability to do malware scans on demand if something's been detected, or you can push out vulnerability remediation, so it can on certain applications, auto remediate any known CVEs and vulnerable software by automatically upgrading that piece of software, such as Adobe Acrobat Reader or something like that, or a browser as well. The FortiClient can also do on-device web filtering. It's very similar to how the FortiGate does its web filtering, where you have the list of categories and you can choose the same sort of actions, so block, monitor, and allow. And it can tie into being connected to your on-premise FortiGate. So when you do an install of EMS, you can get it to suck down your web filter profiles, so they can be consistent, and then you can use the on-net, off-net detection. So when the FortiClient is behind your FortiGate, it relies on the FortiGate doing its web filtering. But then when you go home or traveling around the world for work, it uses the on-client web filtering to give you that same level of protection as on the FortiGate, and it's that whole real-time lookup to our cloud and giving you that ability to sort of block malware, block phishing, block things like that on the go. It also has an application firewall. This again is very similar to application control on the FortiGate. So it's not stopping applications from loading, it's not application whitelisting, it is just stopping that application from being able to access the network, exactly the same as on the FortiGate. So the same level of categories, you can do the same overrides. Yeah, it's again ability to do that on net, off net. So when it's either behind the firewall or not behind the firewall, being able to control that unwanted application when on the go. Like I mentioned before as well, it can do a software inventory, so it will fully report all the software that's installed on your client device. It will tell you the version that it was installed and how many times that's been detected on the network. So you can start using it to get a nice overview of exactly what your clients are doing on the network, and if there's any, get visibility as to whether there's any, I guess, less desirable software, such as maybe a torrent client or something like that installed on a corporate laptop. And the vulnerability scanning as well. So it will scan through and pick up any known vulnerabilities in third-party software, in Windows, and then it will report back all those critical endpoints, the level of criticality. And like I said before, it can, in some instances, auto-remediate those pieces of software into the latest version. And it can also then, you can tie this into sort of the ZTNA tags for tagging of critical devices. When you plug it all into your FortiGate and you have your FortiGate connected to your FortiClient EMS server via a Fabric connector, all your devices have that extra information that the FortiClient can present pushed into the Security Fabric topology and overviews. So if they've got those critical risks, vulnerable software, it will show them as red, it will show them as having vulnerable software, and you'll be able to see that list of vulnerable software from within the Security Fabric topology as well. And if you tie in this into things like FortiAnalyzer, it can then start to auto do playbooks to sort of auto quarantine, auto move vulnerable devices into a quarantine group, or if you've got Forti switching and Forti AP, into a quarantine VLAN as well. Oh, I jumped ahead. Here's the slide explaining about, just showing about the vulnerabilities as well. So just the detail that it pulls out, the nice avatars that it pulls out as well from your logged in user. You can also get it to display email addresses and phone numbers, and on the FortiClient as well, the user can link it into a social account to pull out their sort of, to use that as their avatar and user information as well. So this is what the sort of the automation looks like. So with the FortiAnalyzer detecting that compromised host as a trigger, and then using the actions in the stitches to say, okay, how are we going to quarantine this device? Is it going to be an IP ban? Is it going to be that access layer via the Forti switch or the Forti AP? But we can also do full endpoint quarantine and use FortiClient itself to sort of quarantine that at the endpoint level as well. And the user then gets a nice red box on their screen to say you've been quarantined, please contact IT to get some remediation work done on this. So as well as all of that nice stuff around software detection and vulnerability management, the main purpose of it is to be a antivirus platform. So it's got the usual sort of real-time anti-malware scanning, the ability to detect polymorphic malware. It uses some machine learning based detection as well to detect sort of firmware that doesn't match signatures. It also has an anti-exploit engine, so the ability to detect behavioral changes and see if a package is trying to exploit a piece of software. So that fileless type of fileless malware. And all of these can be integrated, like I said before, into the Forti Sandbox. So either a dedicated on-premise, a cloud dedicated offering, or the Sandbox as a service that comes in the generic AV subscription. And how that looks when it is integrated into Forti Sandbox is you get to see all the sort of all the files that have been uploaded to the Sandbox service, and you can see the ratings that it's come back with and the type of malware that it has detected that sample as. You can then drill down into that sample and that scan to see the report. So we can look at how it was detected. So in this example, it was detected, the file was blocked, and the dynamic signature, that shared signature package, was then pushed out to all the other Forti clients. So if that sample was seen anywhere else in the network, it wouldn't have to consume extra resources to re-sandbox it. We would have that file hash and that file information in a signature and go, okay, we know that that's bad just from that signature. It will then show you as well the sort of how it's come to that detection. So all the process tree sort of growing out, and what services it's spooled, what files it's written, and what it's tried to do really to basically come to that conclusion that the sample is malicious. So like I said at the beginning, we do have some FortiGuard Labs services and a consulting, I guess, arm of that. And some of the services they provide are a best practice service. So this is the ability for when you sort of purchase and look to deploy, it will give you some access to an expert that knows how best to configure FortiClient and FortiEMS from a deployment side of things. So they're not going to go and do the deployment for you, but it gives you the ability for them to give you some best practice recommendations. So how best to deploy it. Here's some sample configurations. Here's some sample profiles and things like that for you to sort of use based on your recommendations that use based on your requirements that you've given them at the beginning. So it's not a hands-on, it's you as a partner or as the end user are still driving the deployment. You're just getting samples and examples from our team of experts on how best to configure in your environment. And then we also have the forensic service, so that post-breach, I guess, incident investigation. So this is available only on the FortiClient cloud. It basically allows a bunch of incident response guys to collect and analyze and report on any incidents that have been in your environment. So annual subscription, not limited by the number of incidents you may have, but it helps, I guess, get at that quicker response time and offloading any I guess any of these investigations and detection reporting from your internal IT team, which are probably overloaded already by other jobs. So that brings to the end my brief overview, and I think we're now passing back to Brendan to talk about how MSPs can utilize the new multi-tenant feature of FortiClient.
Thank you, Matt. That was very well done. So I'm going to talk about how MSSPs can utilize FortiClient in their portfolio and protect their clients. Matt or Kieran, can you see my screen? Yep, perfect. Thank you. So Fortinet provides a comprehensive cybersecurity platform. It's not comprised of just one device. It is comprised of multiple different solutions that all work together to provide a comprehensive solution. So the first step is to protect. So this involves countermeasures across the security fabric for protecting assets, data, and the network from cybersecurity events. We then need to detect, so we find and correlate important information to identify an outbreak. The following updates are available to raise alerts and generate reports. So, FortiAnalyzer might fit into this category, for instance. We can respond to the alerts. So we develop containment techniques to mitigate impacts of security events. So Matt was talking about the automations that we can run to provide the response to these threats. We then need to recover as well. So we need to improve the security posture and processes by implementing security awareness and training in preparation for and recovery from security incidents. So Fortinet provides this training that any one of your staff members can do. We then want to identify as well. So we want to identify processes and assets that need protection. So in this chart, you can see that FortiClient fits into the protect category. So we're installing this on the endpoints to protect against threats. So the way the multi-tenancy kind of works with FortiClient EMS is we have a global site, and in the global settings, we control things like, the different sites. So in this example, we have default site A, site B, and site C. The global settings also set up things like the fully qualified domain name and the port numbers and licenses and things like that. We then set up multiple sites, and in each multiple site, we can do things like log settings. So we can specify which FortiAnalyzer we want that site to report to. We can set up different alerts and different email servers. We can also connect to different FortiGates. So the FortiGates aren't controlled by the global, they're controlled by the site. So the use case would be, you have your MSSP partner, and they have multiple clients. So each client can have their own, basically, instance of EMS that you control. And inside that instance, we can have our different profiles and policies. We can have different LDAP or AD servers. We can have, specified admins for that site. It doesn't have to, we don't have global admins. The MSSP will have a global admin, but we can also have specific admins for that site. So you might want to give your customer access to it. We can also have different features. So you could turn on Chromebook, or you could use iOS. That's not specific to every tenant. Sorry, that is specific to every tenant. And we can also have their own zero trust tags as well. So they're not a combined thing. The global tenancy, as I mentioned before, does the licensing. So you can divvy up the license between each site. It has the default settings, but more importantly is the backup and restore process. You're controlling it for every site. So it doesn't necessarily have to be MSSPs. It could also be, you could have different client or different tenant or branches in this case. So if you have multiple offices, you could have a site for each different office and have different rules and different processes for each office. Doesn't necessarily have to just be an MSSP. So you can see in this screenshot that there's multiple different licenses that you can assign. You're not restricted to just buying one type of license. So you could have just the ZTNA licenses, or you could have the full client, the EPP. We're not really restricted in that sense. So some of the per site configuration includes different dashboards, local site administrators, different endpoint groups, different profiles, different policies, different compliance rules, even the email alerts and LDAP servers. So now I'll show you a bit of a demo. So this is just a FortiClient server that I've got running at home. I'm going to log in as my admin. So this is going to show you the global settings. And what you can see here is I'm running the latest build. So I'm running 7.2.1. Now, because it's a global, it controls the firmware for every site. So every site will be running 7.2.1 of EMS. You can see the licenses that have been assigned. I've got 25 in total. I'm using 2 and 10 have been assigned. If we go to administrations, you can see I've got a couple of different users, but more importantly, this home user is assigned to just the home EMS tenant, and I'll show you that later. And then the EMS settings, for instance, you can see I can change these here. So I've got listed on this IP address and this FQDN, but I won't be able to change that inside my tenant. So that's just something important to note. So and it's quite easy to change tenant. We just click on global up the top here, and you can see the default in the home sites. So I can just swap into the home site, and now I get all my endpoint information. I get all my policies and profiles and things like that. If I sign out and sign in as the home account, so this is a super administrator just of this home. So you'll see here I can't get to global and I can't get to default anymore. I've got licenses that are assigned to me, so I've got 5 licenses. You'll also see here that I've got an endpoint. You can see the IP address, the MAC address. There's a whole bunch of information here. You can even see that it's running on QEMU. So this is a virtual machine that's running on my hardware here. And then you can also see which features have been installed and configured. So you can see here that antivirus is installed, but because the bug isn't green, it's not configured. So it's currently not running antivirus on my machine. The one that is configured and enabled is remote access and vulnerability scanning. You can also see that ZTNA is hidden, but we can change that. That just hides the ZTNA endpoints so that the clients can't see them. We can also see that the current antivirus that I'm using is Microsoft Defender, and that's because this antivirus is not enabled. So FortiClient can pick up third-party antivirus solutions as well. What is the time? So we've got a bit of time. So what I'll show you here is we've got different profiles that we can assign to the machines. So we've got remote access, which is configured. And in here, I can set up a VPN tunnel so that the client doesn't have to input it themselves. So if I go manual, go next, I can set up an SSL VPN or an IPsec VPN and have this all pre-filled so that all the user has to do is click connect and type in their password. We can also run scripts. We can set up advanced settings so we can do SAML login, for instance, with Azure AD. We can save their usernames if they want to. There's all sorts of things that we can do here. We can also apply tags, ZTNA tags. If we look at the web filter that Matt mentioned before, we can specify the different categories which are the same as what's on the FortiGate. These web filters can also be imported from a FortiGate as well, so they are synced with the gate. We can do video filtering now. That's new. I haven't seen the video filtering before, but we can do category-based filtering, and I believe this would only be YouTube. At least it is on the gate, so that would be my assumption. The vulnerability scanning, we can do like scheduled scans, we can do automatic patching. You can change what level you want the automatic patches to happen, whether it's critical or high or low. Usually I have this, I have a scheduled scan enabled in my in my corporate machines so that I can see if anyone's installing new software or hasn't done updates and things like that. The malware protection is the antivirus. So we can do anti-ransomware, we can do your normal, real-time protection, you can do scheduled scans. This is the same as most antivirus companies out there to date. The anti-exploit one is good as well, so you can detect the web browsers and detect whether there's any adware or spyware inside the web browser. Things like the default search engine is being changed, stuff like that. We can prevent removable media access, so we can stop USB drives from being used. And these are all fairly common in the industry. We can integrate Sandbox. So this is just FortiSandbox. So it can scan a file before the user opens it, or you can allow the user to open the file and scan it later. However, if you scan it later, then you'll have to do a remediation if it is infected. So just bear that in mind. So the firewall features is more similar to the application control on the FortiGate. It's still category based, and it picks up the application signatures. So we can block things like P2P, we can block proxies right at the machine so they don't actually touch your network. And the more important one to block is botnets. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind. If you block botnets, you can prevent things like CryptoLocker taking hold. So we mentioned before about ZTNA destinations. So these are used to create a tunnel back to a server somewhere. So these are TCP connections. And it just creates a tunnel that the user can access local infrastructure without actually being connected to a traditional VPN. We've done a webinar on this in the past, so please check out our website and watch that webinar. We can also do system settings. So in the system settings, we can do things like preventing the client from being uninstalled or unregistered. So allow user to shut down when registered to EMS, so that prevents FortiClient from being terminated. We can tell it to send logs to a FortiAnalyzer. We can also do things like pushing out CA certificates. So these certificates we can import from a FortiGate and then use FortiClient to push it out to enable things like deep inspection. We can also push out iOS configuration profiles here as well. Once you've created all your profiles, we can then apply them using a policy. So using the policy, at the moment, I've just got the default one selected, but if we turn off Fabric, we can have a different policy to when they're on-site or when they're off-site. So this enables things like an auto-dial tunnel. So when you're off-site, you might want the client to VPN back into the headquarters or VPN back into SASE, for instance. And the off-site profile will enable that, but when they're on-site, you don't want that VPN tunnel established. So you could have a different policy for when they're on-site. And we can have a multiple different on-fabric detection rules to enable that. I usually just ping my default gateway. And if it's pingable, well, then you know they're on site. So that's the policy and profiles, just a really quick demo there. The zero trust tags is where things start becoming cool because you can use these on your gate as well. So what I would usually do is add a tag that might be antivirus is up to date. So AV is up to date. I didn't press enter. Date. And then we can add a rule that says antivirus software is installed and running. And then we can add another one that says AV signatures is up to date. So as long as those two conditions are true, then our machine will receive that tag. And you can see here that there's a low tag because FortiClient thinks that it is, you know, low in the vulnerabilities, you know, the current situation. So the threat of it is low at the moment. This should update in a moment to show that the antivirus is up to date, at least I hope. I haven't tested it, so it may not. Oh, there we go. AV is up to date. So you can see here that my endpoint has matched this tag. So then if I log into my FortiGate, I can then see that tag and use it in firewall policies. So you can start becoming dynamic with the state of your machines. If we look at the vulnerabilities, so it did a vulnerability scan. Now this is a fresh install of Windows 11. I have not done Windows updates. And so you can see just out of the box, there's 4 critical vulnerabilities for RAS. So this usually means I need to do a Windows update. And we can just quite simply click the patch button and it will go through and download those Windows updates and do the patching. But we can also see all the high vulnerabilities. And this gives you, this is a combined view here, but you can also click on the endpoint to just see what vulnerabilities it has. So that's kind of EMS in a nutshell. I might hand back over to Kieran to talk about the licensing of it.
Thank you, Brendan. Let me know if you guys can now see my screen.
You sure can.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thanks for that, Brendan. We'll just quickly touch on the FortiClient components. So there's two main licensing editions for FortiClient. There is the VPN/ZTNA edition, and there's also the EPP and ATP edition. So the ZTNA edition gives you all of your requirements that you would need for traditional VPN type deployment. So you've got your ZTNA functionality, you've got SSL VPN and IPsec VPN functionality, as well as having web filtering, the vulnerability and remediation that Brendan just showed, which is really powerful, and also, of course, the ability to have telemetry, centralized logging, and your reporting, all that functionality is all built into the ZTNA edition of FortiClient. And if you want the real endpoint protection solution like sandbox integration, AI-powered next-generation AV, your automated quarantine functionality, that ransomware protection that we saw, and things like USB device control, all of that is bundled under the EPP license. And then, of course, there are additional services that Matt was talking about. There is the best practice services as well as the remediation services. And there is also an additional service that we haven't talked about today, which is also a managed service edition of FortiClient. And if you're interested in sort of what that looks like, just reach out and our pre-sales can run you through the additional managed services solution if you're interested. Now, there's a whole bunch of additional places where you can get a lot more information around FortiClient. There is the product page and the data sheet hosted on Fortinet's website, which is full of really, really rich information. Helps you have that starting point. But also the Fortinet Fabric, the Fortinet's partner portal under the assets component. There's a lot of information in there about sales sheets and marketing campaigns and how to start the conversation with your customers around an endpoint protection platform and how to evaluate what is the best endpoint protection platform for them. So have a look through there. There's lots of really useful information. For anyone that's NSE 4 and above certified, there's also a platform called FortiDemo. If you haven't heard of this before, it essentially allows you to go through and run a full fabric environment. And you can go through and you can either run through a set sort of structured demo and lab environment. So there's one for like ZTNA, SD-WAN, Security Fabric, or you can just go in there, spin it up for a day or two, and wreak havoc, test things, deploy FortiClient EMS, enable certain functionalities, so that you're familiar with exactly how to use EMS and FortiClient. So if you haven't already heard of this and you've got NSE 4 and above, definitely go to fndn.fortinet.net and register your access for the FortiDemo website. Now, FortiClient also has a free trial license, and this allows you to have three free FortiClient licenses through FortiClient EMS, and it's 3 Windows, macOS, Linux, iOS, and Android endpoints, and 3 Chromebooks indefinitely. It is the Zero Trust Network Access license, which doesn't give you the full antivirus, EPP platform, but at least gives you that starting point of the ZTNA license. And you have to have an eligible FortiCloud account. You can only have 1 trial license per FortiCloud account. And the only gotcha is that there's no technical support handled with your instance. So if you run into any issues, just reach out to us, reach out to maybe your local SC. They might be able to give you a little bit of help, but there is no official support from Fortinet support themselves. With that, we'll quickly jump into a little bit of a Q&A. So we've got a couple of questions here. I might read these out for you, Matt and Brandon, if that's all right.
Yeah, please do.
So we've got a question here. Can I have FortiClient Cloud and FortiSASE on the same machine / client?
So the short answer is no. FortiSASE behind the scenes uses EMS. So you can't have, well, so at the end of the day, it's the same client. They just can't be talking to two different places.
Yeah, so when you actually, excuse me, when you actually onboard into FortiSASE, if you have an existing FortiClient Cloud EMS on the account that you want to use, that will get blown away, and a new EMS Cloud instance will get provisioned. You can't run the SASE and a FortiClient Cloud EMS on the same support account, but yeah, they're exactly the same agent. So if you've pushed out FortiClient everywhere, you just use a new invite code to onboard them into your SASE instance after that's been sort of migrated over and stood up.
Perfect. We also had another question. Can we have ZTNA and EPP licenses in the same FortiClient EMS instance?
Yes and no. So when you're using the multi-tenanted version, you can have the different licenses for different sites. But if you're just using it with one site, the sort of normal way of using it, then no, it's one license across the board.
Perfect, thank you. And then we just had another question come through. When is multi-tenancy going to be allowed on the cloud version of EMS? Matt, I don't suppose you would possibly know the answer to this one.
I can't discuss roadmap.
Fair enough, fair enough. We did have another question, which was, can I upgrade from one FortiClient license to another, for example, from ZTNA to EPP? Brendan,
Yes.
you might know the answer to that one.
Sorry, I missed the question. Can you say it again?
Can you upgrade from one FortiClient license to another, for example, from the ZTNA license to the EPP license?
Yeah, so you can definitely upgrade as long as you only have the one license type in your support portal. So if you have a ZTNA license, then we can do a co-term to upgrade you to the EPP license. That's for sure.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all the questions we have so far. If there's anything outstanding, we'll circle back post the event and reach out to answer any leftover questions that you guys might have. So to help you get onto the road for success, we've put together 5 next steps for you to all go through to sort of help that journey onto the FortiClient. First thing is, this is only part 1 of a 3-part series of webinars. This one's focused on FortiClient. Next one, we're going to focus on FortiSASE, and then we're going to finish it off with FortiE, and the topic is all around endpoint protection. So definitely register for the FortiSASE webinar. Also register for the upcoming FortiE webinar, just so you're familiar with those products as well. Step 2, reach out to your account manager to arrange further discussions with our pre-sales team. If you have any outstanding questions, or you want us to demonstrate something, a particular feature or service, then we're more than happy to do that. Then, run an internal demo to gain that first-hand experience with FortiClient, whether you want to use the free 3 licenses that are available, the Forti demo platform, or if you want to purchase some NFR SKUs that you can use those internally, reach out. We're more than happy to help there. Then once you're sort of familiar and you've got that sort of first-hand experience, we definitely recommend running a demo for a prospective customer to highlight to them how FortiClient is easy, it's lightweight, and it provides powerful endpoint protection services to them. And then once you've done that and you've done the demos for your partners and you're really well versed in it, then you can develop and sell a converged Fortinet security platform designed to work specifically for your customers. Leverage the security fabric, leverage the threat intelligence, and take the discussion away from just you need protection on your device to a more holistic solution that meets a range of their cybersecurity requirements. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and a special thank you for Matt for joining us for today's session and taking us through FortiClient and all of its fantastic features. So thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you, Brendan, also for co-hosting. And if anyone has any outstanding questions, please reach out at presales@wavelink.com.au. We look forward to seeing you guys very soon.